Well, you were talking about how this has affected different water systems throughout the world. Um, can you give us some examples of what has happened in countries where governments have allowed private firms to start investing and distributing water? Has this generally been a good development for those lacking access to water, or has it been a bad thing?
Well, there's a lot of different market areas. So let's talk about agriculture and then talk about urban areas. In agriculture, the creation of market rights that can be and trading of market rights has been almost universally a boon for farmers. That's because farmers who have more water than they want are able to sell the water. Farmers who are keen to use more water and have higher value uses will make money with water. And it's very important to remember that sometimes you can't just get water. If there's no market, you just can't get it at all. Or if it's, even though your neighbor might want to sell it to you, because there's a regulatory barrier to transferring the water. So I know that the farmers in Australia have had massive benefits from the water markets there, mostly because they have more flexibility of when to use their water. They know how much it's worth, and they can sell it to their neighbors if that's going to be beneficial to them. In cities and urban areas where you have a monopolistic water system that's supplying water, the price incentive is very important in terms of delivering service to the people that don't have water service. So if you have a for-profit company that can, and this is borrowing directly from Water for Sale, this narrative, if they can extend the service area to a poor neighborhood and make money, then they will. And what I said earlier is that the poor people not only have money, but they are paying already 5 or 10 times the price of tap water to buy water from trucks. So they are definitely economically viable customers, and they are typically not going to get service with a public water provider that does not have a profit incentive to deliver that water compared to a private water provider. It's easily possible that a public water provider will provide service, but it'll be not because of a profit incentive. It'll be because the management in the municipal water company does want to extend water. A private company has a much simpler decision. Can I make money off of this customer? And that decision is almost always true because customers are willing to pay for water, and the water service is actually quite cheap.
I see. What about the environmental effects then of when private companies or private firms would come into these sort of regions? Do they maybe work better for the customers, but do they have a negative good things for the environment?
Well, if they're taking water that could go into environmental use, so let's say accidentally harming the environment, that's one thing. If they're discharging wastewater that's going to pollute the environment, that's another thing. But that's not a private versus public company question. That's a question of how many property rights are there. So if there's too much water being withdrawn from a stream, for example, that's because the government has issued too many water withdrawal permits. So that's a government problem. And if wastewater is being discharged that's too dirty for that stream, then that's a government problem in terms of regulating wastewater. It really has nothing to do with private or public firms. There's lots of things we could discuss about common law and property rights to clean water, but the bottom line is that private companies can do just as good a job or just as bad a job at managing water from an environmental perspective.
That's very interesting.
Sure.
Did you have another question on that particular point, Luke?
No, I was going to say, I guess it sort of hinges on whether property rights are enforced and then how are they originally allocated to begin with. Because I guess if a company is allowed to pollute in a certain region and they're not punished for it, well then that's, I guess, the company may only just be following a certain set of incentives that for them it's worth paying, and it works for them to pollute. But I guess then it comes back to, okay, well, why were they allowed to pollute, or whatever region? Why were they not being punished for it? Whose land is getting wrecked or whatever from this? So I guess, yeah, that's part of the things who...
Yeah, exactly.
So
So the problem is that if you have, if there's, say that there's a government regulation and it says that you can have so many parts per million of, I don't know, mercury in the water discharge from your wastewater plant, and say that that number is even being followed according to by the dischargers, but it's off by a factor of 10 in terms of human health, then you'll have companies that are in compliance with the law that are actually harming people, but there's no recourse because they're following government regulations. Under a common law regime, which is different than a regulatory regime, the people who are being harmed can essentially sue and show that they're being harmed and win against the company. So whether or not it's private or public. So that you can have badly written regulations. And likewise with water rights, the property rights to water, you can have too many water rights issued by the government so that you don't not only have what are called wet water rights, but also dry or paper water rights. And these paper water rights are often issued because politicians want to give gifts to their friends, and they'll issue twice as many permits for water as exist in the stream, for example. And that is a disaster for existing holders of wet water rights because now they have some doubt as to whether or not they're going to get their water or someone else is going to take it from them.
Yeah, that particular example has a lot of application toward several of our shows where we discuss various aspects on monetary theory, but we'll leave that for another time.
Exactly. It's a kind of cheapening of your currency.
Yes. Well, I want to bring it over to talk about the lovely topic of sewage. You know, the management of sewage is a big problem, I'm sure, in developing countries as well, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, is it managed at all is the first thing. There's, I don't remember what the number is, but I think it's, the number is in fact 2 billion people around the world practice what's called open defecation. So their human waste doesn't go into any kind of collection system. And this is a problem in terms of just pollution of any kind of water or land or even roads. I've been in India and the beaches are covered with feces, or you know, you walk up and down the hills in Nepal and the paths are covered with feces. So this is essentially because it's hard to pay for infrastructure. There's also sometimes a tradition or an ignorance of how to handle human waste. I know that I have a really great example from China where I was next to a farmer's field in a poor part of China, and there were 4 outhouses right next to each other. And that was because the farmers recognized the value of human waste, which they call night soil, which they use to fertilize their fields, and there was no way they were going to let some other farmer get their waste. So they were holding it in their bank account for distribution into the field as fertilizer.
Wow.
And that was kind of the opposite example of what you see in somewhere like India.
Well, I'm going to give you about a minute to answer this question, but can private firms have a positive effect here, and have they had a positive effect?
Well, it depends on the incentives you set up. So if you hire a company, if you're a city and you hire a company and you say, we're going to pay you according to the number of people you connect to the waste water network and the amount of sewage that you divert out of streets and open sewers, then that company has an incentive to set up, you know, community latrines or even household connections to collect as much human waste as possible, given the costs of doing that, which are quite high.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we are going to come into a break, and we're going to run out of time before I can let you really develop any additional questions on this fascinating and I think extremely important topic. We are talking about that next to water, or next to air, water and then money are probably the 3 things that most people, when they get right down to it, have to think about pretty much the most. And but in any case, folks, we'll be back in just a couple of minutes, so please stay with us. We'll have our final segment here on Radio Free Market with Dr. David Zetland, and we're talking about water for sale. Should we privatize water? So please stay with us. Thank you very much.